first night in Italy, there was this huge storm, and they had a drought before I got there. But it's a mountaintop town, so you're basically right in the storm clouds. And I'd just been traveling like 30 hours. And by the time I got there, I was just exhausted, but this huge storm rolled in, and you're basically right in that storm cloud, and it was terrifying. It made you feel, it didn't matter how tired I was, I felt. My body of work that I'm working on for my thesis is based off of my trips to Italy. I spent the last 2 summers in Italy for about 2 weeks at a time. The way our eyeball works, how we sense what we see, and then how we perceive it, and how our brain inserts these depth cues that we don't realize that our brain is doing. It really interested me, and I was thinking about that while I was making work in Italy, and I began to break down the shapes, no matter how far in space they were or how close in space they were, into just shapes. It starts with these drawings and the general shape of things, and I begin just putting the outlines of these shapes, and not directly from the drawing, but I manipulate them so they work together and they play off of each other. And in a way, I'm playing with the drawing itself, the place. It becomes something entirely different once I am no longer observing the space, but observing what I already have on paper. And from the first mark that I put down, I react to that, and not necessarily what I'm viewing, not even my other sketchbook. I'm reacting to what is directly in front of me. Drawing is the basis, the foundation for all of my work. It's important to be able to take record of your thought process in a sketchbook through drawing, or keeping track of your visual experiences in a sketchbook as well. And that's how most of my work starts. I sketch what I'm observing. I go in and abstract that drawing and just play around with it. With the lines, the shapes, the forms, how everything is working together. My main concept is highly process-based, and it's not necessarily the subject matter. The subject matter that I'm working on for my thesis project is based off of my trip to Italy, and it's kind of manifesting this experience that I had there and putting it on paper and canvas. And it's not trying to depict what I saw there. It's more about how I experienced it, how I felt, what I saw, and processing that to how I am right now and what I'm thinking about things right now. And it's not necessarily working in the past, it's working in the present. I don't want it to be this memory. I want it to be this building block of experiences that helps me make and helps me move forward with my work and keep growing. In my work, I have these shapes, I have these forms. There's a lot of line work as well, and these shapes, they interact with each other, and they work with each other, and they work against each other, and they're all tied together, they're all a part of the same painting, and the relationship between these shapes becomes very important in the work, and to me, more so as a formal idea, and how it breaks up the space and the visual plane is also important to me when I'm making these. And each shape has its own character and its own vitality to it. There's still a tension between 2D and 3D that having these shapes have their own character creates. Yeah, I mean, it begins with the drawing and kind of manipulating the drawing into this abstract thought. It also remains this abstract thought throughout the entire process of me applying print and paint on top of it. And while I'm doing this abstracting, I am playing with the medium to create this ambiguous balance and this ambiguous space. But I try to make it just ambiguous enough to where they can say, hey, that looks like something, but what is it? I use this arsenal of medium to choose from to make each work. Typically I use the acrylic paint, the fluid acrylic paint, and then I screen print. Sometimes it'll be charcoal, sometimes pastel, sometimes not, sometimes graphite. It just depends on what I feel that it needs, and it changes every time. Each piece demands its own process and its own materials and its own colors. My color comes from just a reaction process as well. Typically I'll start out with one color, and it could be a color that I had seen recently or just a color straight out of the tube, and I just pick it up and it just has to start somewhere. Typically the colors that I start painting with, and it never show up in the actual painting because it gets painted over or drawn over, and it's just to start this process. It's to get the ball rolling. I don't necessarily consider myself a color theorist or anything like that. I know the color wheel, that's about it. One thing I'm not afraid of is to try new things and to dabble and just kind of throw myself into things. Why not try to have this painting reach out from the wall and grab somebody's attention? My work has this force that it comes out and grabs you, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. It makes you feel something. It's supposed to catch you and keep you, and the keeping you there is probably the hard part. But my work is meant to be felt, not thought about. You don't have to be an art lover to feel the sensation that it has. In art is the visual plane or the visual space. I think that that's still very important in art, and that comes above the conceptual. So making work and thinking about work are in two completely different categories for me. When I am making, I'm not necessarily thinking. And by thinking, I mean I'm not trying to rationalize what colors will go well together, or the angle of this line needs to be this number, or it needs to be straight. It's more of just a feeling and reacting to that feeling. I make art to make art, and it's the only reason why I've left the country to do art trips. It's the only books that I read, thankfully. There's a lot of pictures and art books, but it's slowly become ingrained in me, and that comes from hard work and not like a divine hand or a divine touch or anything like that.